Okay, let's actually first learn how to actually check the stored procedure. In this video we are going to talk about the stored procedures only, and it's going to be a little bit a longer video. So let's go and check first how to actually get the stored procedure. It says news Northwind, go select start from subjects where type equals to P. This SQL statement should actually list all the name of the stored procedure that exists in the Northwind database. And this is the main command. The database name is actually whatever you want to select. Okay, and we have got the name of stored procedure. We can also get it from the programmability under the database Northwind. I can actually go and check it out. Here it is. As you can see, here it is, the same thing that comes up here. Let's spin it out. Okay, now actually we can have a bigger screen to look at. Now let's actually go a little bit further. In this, actually first we will start by looking at variables. How do the variables work in the SQL server? Now I have defined these variables. As you can see, actually I can declare multiple variables with a single declare statement. As you can see, I have declared multiple variables with a single statement. As I say declare at, you should always start a variable with the at and gust id and then the type of the variable followed by a comma and then a second variable name and so on and so forth. Here I have declared multiple variables with a single select statement, as you can see, and I am going to now to initialize these variables with the values. Now if you go down and if you see, I have initialized these variables with the values, as you can see. Now once I have initialized all these variables with the values, I can use a select statement with the select at the rate and all these variables, and it will this value would be get listed in the select statement. Now the thing is that after initializing a variable, I go a little bit further. What I do, I go and actually select the fields from the customer table into this variable. They are exactly the same, matching to the customer data type and the customer the variable names. And as you can see, I'm actually putting those value from the customer table into this variable where customer ID equals to ZZZZZ. Now remember that thing, I have deliberately used the ZZ because this record doesn't exist. Now what happens when the record, this row doesn't exist, there are no actually values being passed. However, the original values of the variable that was initialized is retained. It doesn't become a space or null. Remember that thing. That's a very big difference. Now let's go and actually check it out. And again I am going to check this thing down, and you will see that the older values are still retained because there is no record for the cust ID equals to or customer ID equals to ZZZ. Okay. Now let's go and run this thing. This is the first statement of the declare. I am declaring a variable here. Multiple variables being getting declared. Then I am going to I am initializing this variable. Then I am going to select this variable, the select statement, and then here again I am going to actually select the record from the customer table where the customer ID equals to ZZZ into these variables, and then I am going to again actually use the select statement to select that variable, and you will find that it still retains the older value. Here it is, and we are done. As you can see, it is still retaining the older value. It has not actually, the value has not become a space or it has not become a null. It's still retaining the older value because though the record was not found for the ZZZ, but the variable still retains the older value. So you should be very careful while using this statement. You should always remember that thing. It may retain the older value. If you are using it, it may search for the older value. If your record is not found, so be very sure in the SQL statement that what you are going to do with it. After every select statement, you check out whether there was a row count, whether there was a row returned. We will come to that thing, how to check it out, but this is what I mean. Now let's go a little bit further. Now there is a global variable identity. What is identity? Identity is at 88 identity actually checks for the identity value, which is actually automatically generated by the SQL server for a identity field, which you usually use it for a primary key in a table. Now let's actually see it. Create table car id int identity 1 comma 1. 1 comma 1 is the 1 comma 1 is where it will be starting, and 1 is the seed 1, and 1 is the incrementing. What happens is that 1 is where it starts, and 1 by it gets incremented by 1. This is how actually, this is not actually, I have not put a primary key here, otherwise usually people use it for primary key. Make, this is the make varchar 50 color varchar, all those things is the other variables. This is the main thing, identity, as you can see, and I am going to actually run this statement, and is going to create a table for the car, and we are going to have the identity as one of its column, and I am going to insert a row into it. As you can see, I have declared another variable id int val int insert into car values Mercedes black. Remember that thing, this id val has been declared so that I can get the identity value. I am nowhere inserting the identity value into the table. As you can see, the identity value is being actually inserted by the system by itself. It will start from the 1 and add 1 by an increment by 1, because it is 1 by 1. Okay, and here actually in the next statement, always remember, whenever you want to catch the values of the global variable, which that will start with the double at the rate, you should immediately use it, catch the values immediately into local variable immediately after this, after you have run the select insert statement. Now in this case, I am going to catch this value immediately, and then I am going to print it. Here it is. I am going to go and execute this statement, and you will see that it will show the value of 1, because the first time I actually generated the value of 1 for the identity. Next time I again run it, because identity increases 1 by 1, so it should actually show this time the 1 row affected with the 2 identity 2. So far so good. Let's move a little bit further now that you know what is identity and about a global variable. So again there is another variable, that is @error, and you can see double @error. Okay, it actually catches the value of the error. If there is no error, actually the error value of has a value of 0, which says there was no error, it was successful. If it was not successful, it will contain something other than the 0. Let's go and actually check it out. Or declare int error. I am going to immediately again in this case also global variable, I am actually using a select int error double error immediately after the update or the select statement, whatever you are going to do with this thing, and it printed that thing. And here it is. I am going to execute this statement, and there we go. The error is 0, as you can see. And then there is another variable. Actually again, if I try to use it with the ID, but how it won't actually insert a row, but it won't generate an error, because there is no error actually being generated in this case. It will say 0 rows inserted, error is still 0, until and unless actually I try to insert 3, 4, 5, 6 value into it, and then it may create a problem and it will generate an error. Okay, let's move to the little bit further. Then there is a row count that actually gives you the number of the rows affected. As I was talking previously, if you want to do something, you should always take the row count, whether there was some rows returned or not, because there is no other way actually to find out whether there is no some, in some cases, that whether some rows were returned, until unless you use the count again. But in this case, there is the other row count actually tells you the number of rows selected or returned or updated. Again, use it immediately after the sequence statement, otherwise you may lose the value of this row count. Let's actually run this thing. Again I am declaring a row counter variable, selecting it, and again select count, and if row equals to counter equals no 0, and further if you go, and I am going to execute this statement, and then you can see that it will return the number of the rows found in the message side. This is the select statement, and this is about where the number of the rows found. This is 11 rows. Actually this is a message that is being shown up by the system. If I don't want to show it, I should have set no count on. Let's move a little bit further. Now as you can see, there are a lot of variables. There are also table variables. Now here it is a very similar way of actually declaring a table variable. Declare m @m table int id int identity int 1, primary key. Same, very similar to the table I have created, but in this case I am actually trying to create a very You can insert, delete, update whatever you want you on the table variable, as you can do it in on the table. But remember that this is a table variable is temporary. As soon as you actually finish finished executing the statement, the table variable disappears, just like any other variable. As you can see, I am actually inserting this 3 recs into this thing, and it should work. It will, and then I'm going to select it. Let's see. I'm just going to show it to you. What, see, the identity has been inserted 1, 2 and 3, as you can see. But however, if I try to now update it in this clause, okay, this statement, if I use it update statement to update a table variable, you will see it will give an error and it will say that the table doesn't exist, because the table, once actually it was created, was, it says table must be declared, table variable must be declared. What happens is it is immediately, the table variable is actually immediately wiped out once the statement is over. So you have to execute all these statements all together. Now let's go and actually use a delete, update, all the statement on the table variable in just one go, and you will see that all those things getting executed automatically. I will just show it to you. This is how you do it, and you will see that all the table variables are getting executed automatically, and it gets updated also. Now here it is. Here is actually I have updated it, the table variable Umar Truman. As you can see, here is then my update statement. Here is getting updated in the second thing, and again I am deleting it where ID equals 2. The Umar Truman record has to be got deleted. As you can see, again the table variable, now that the statement is over, there is no table variable. Remember that thing. So this is how the table variable works. Now that you have understood what the table variables are and what the other things are, let's move to the stored procedure. Let's really begin with the stored procedure, and in this time we are going to create a stored procedure, really a stored procedure. It says, let's start with the create a stored procedure USP. Copy stored procedure name as if object ID employee table copy is null, then drop the table. We are just checking whether this table exists. If it exists, drop that table. And in this case, I am saying select star into the employee table, and I am going to create this new table from the employee, that will be replica of the employee, because I am going to select all the records in this case, and I am going to create the stored procedure. This is my stored procedure. No big deal, very simple, only a single select statement and one checking it whether the table exists or not. Here I run the SQL statement, as you can see, and this procedure gets created on the Northwind database. And you can see that it has been executed and is being completed. So far so good. Now to execute the stored procedure, I have to just say execute the stored procedure and go. And to check the table whether it has created that table, I can always check it out with the select from the, and it should show me the number of the rows in that table are exactly as that are in the employees. There we go. Okay, it has created a table. As you can see, there are 9 rows into it, and it says 9 rows affected. It's saying it twice, once from the stored procedure and again because for the select statement. Okay, now let's move to the further a little bit, creating more stored procedure, and this time I am going to create a stored procedure into the pubs database. So I am going to say use pubs, and I am going to select execute, and I am jumped into the pubs database. Now what procedure we are going to create is, in this case I am going to create a stored procedure with a parameter. As you can see, as I have created stored procedure speed already check author ID varchar 11 equals to null. If null author ID is null, then return 0. In this case, don't do anything, just return from the stored procedure, doing nothing. This returns here, it breaks off, no other statement is getting executed from here. If the author ID is null, author ID is the parameter that is being passed from the stored procedure line. When you are going to execute, you are going to pass a parameter. By the default, I have assigned the value equals to null, which means that the default value is null. In the case if the user passes null value, it returns a 0, nothing but a 0, and the further the stored procedure is never getting executed. Let's move a little bit further. In this first select statement, it says select royalty per. Now again it is putting it into a variable equals to sum royalty per. This variable is going to get created automatically. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about declaring this variable at all. It gets created automatically from the title's author, where AU ID equals to author ID. Now this is the what is being passed from the up, and it's just jumping here. This variable we are going to select it again here. Again a similar statement, but this time I am going to actually, this was actually taking it from the title author, the sum, the royalty per, and in this case I am using a royalty per. Actually whatever I have got the value in the statement, when I am going to select it from the authors, where the author ID equals to AU ID, and you can get a, and on a successful I am going to return a value equals 1. However, it may or may not return a row, so there are other ways of checking these things. We'll come to it, but this is how actually you create a stored procedure, and you get it executed, and it runs. The object name already exists in the database, no problems. We'll go and delete it. Object ID, let's execute it, and it will drop and recreate the object. So we have created a stored procedure. Now I am going to run this stored procedure because it has a return value int. Okay, in this case I am passing the execute RT. So remember always that the return value has to be after the execute statement, not before the execute statement. At the RAT, at RT, whatever that variable you are going to reflect, you are going to return, the value has to come after the execute statement and before the stored procedure name equals to. This is what is going to be returned from here, that is the return 0, return 1. This is what is going to be cached here. Okay, in this case I am passing a null, which should not actually execute the stored procedure, and it will be actually left out just after the run, after it checks whether it is null, and it returns 0 or whatever value you want to return, and it doesn't execute the stored procedure at all. In this case it returns 0, as I have already said. You can choose whatever you want to return. Here again it is again declared. This time I am going to actually use a return value, which is I am going to pass ID will really exist, and it should return a 1, and it should actually execute the stored procedure. Okay, here it has returned a 1 in this column, and it is giving the this was what 140, that was actually generated by first select statement from the title authors, and then the second statement we are actually using the AUF name and AUL name from the authors, where ID equals to author ID, that which we have supplied as a parameter. This is how it is. Now we will go a little bit further still. We will create a very similar, this is another version of the same similar actually stored procedure that is up there. I am going to just show it to you what the difference is. Here it is. Now in this case, instead of actually returning a 0 or 1, I am going to return a royalty per. Royalty per is what actually I have got it in a single statement. There is no another select statement actually I have created here. So in this case I am going only selecting one single statement that is returning a sum of the royalty, and I am going to return this thing using a stored procedure. Very similar with just simplified, just to show you how to use a return clause. Nothing more than it. Here we go. We create a stored procedure. I am going to execute it, and as you can see, it has got executed, completed successfully. Now I am going to show you how it returns a value. In the first case it will return a 0 or -1, whatever that has been defined in the stored procedure. In this case it was -1, and in this case it should return the value that is summed, maybe around 140, as it was in the previous case. Okay, and this is how you use a return clause. Now so far so good. Now let's create a stored procedure with the option of the encryption. Now suppose if you wanted, there are circumstances where you would like to actually create a stored procedure with the encryption option. You can always create a stored procedure with the encryption option, but the only problem is that if you are using an encryption option, then it is very difficult. If you lose the text and you don't have the luck, it's very difficult for you to get the text back. So it is better you have a hard copy or a soft copy, whatever you feel like, and keep it by the side if you are using an encryption method. Okay, because you cannot you won't be able to yourself be able to see the text yourself. Okay, here it goes. It says use pubs, create. There's another option which actually allows you to create a stored procedure with a schema binding. And the schema binding is that whenever you create a stored procedure with a schema binding, you cannot modify the underlying objects of the stored procedure. It's very simple. Nothing. It applies to the functions. It applies to everything else. Okay, here is a stored procedure. Use pubs go, create stored procedure DBO. Okay, I can actually check it out and drop it if it exists. Okay, now I'm going to create a procedure. Create procedure DBO with the procedure name, whatever the encryption, select start from the author equal to contract equals to 1. Give me all that authors that are. This is what actually the statement would be. This is what the text would be into the stored procedure, but it won't be. You won't be able to see it first because you are creating up the encryption. Here we go. I'm going to create a stored procedure. Very simple stored procedure, but now the thing is that now I'm going to execute the stored procedure, and then I'm going to use SP help text to check whether I can see the stored procedure, and it will say that it is encrypted. In this case, it is being getting executed. The stored procedure has got executed. In the next statement, actually, I'm going to check out the text of my stored procedure that I just created with the encryption option, and it won't actually show you any details of the text, as you can see in the stored procedure. Here it is. It says the text of the object is encrypted, so forget about it. As you can see, with the SQL Server 2008, you can pass a table as a parameter. Before you pass a table as a parameter, you have to define that data type for the table. In other words, you must create a user defined table type to do what you want to. You use a create type statement to actually define that type. Okay, nothing, no big difference. It's very simple. You can define a user defined table with the primary key. However, the foreign keys aren't allowed as it is being specified for the user defined type. Once you have created a table type, you can create a stored procedure that accepts the data for the type as a parameter, and then you can use it. In this case, I'm going to just show it to you how it is done. I have created a type. I created a table type. Here is create type authors for CA as table. Once I created, and it's exactly as the table how you created. Nothing, no big difference, except you say instead of creating table, you say create type table author for CA. I'm just creating a table very similar type to the author table, and I'm going to just push the records for the CA or whatever I want to into this thing, and it should work. And it has a primary key also with a AU ID which is defined here. No foreign keys allowed. The problem is that if it exists, it will create a problem. So I will just drop the if it exists. Now here it is a beautiful thing. I have already actually ran this SQL statement, and actually I tried to drop this thing. Okay, it will not allow you to drop this type, and it will give you an error because it is being used by the stored procedure. So you cannot drop a type. Again, it's very similar to the schema binding concept, but it is in this case there is no schema binding used. But this won't actually allow you to drop because this type is being used by the SP insert author CA stored procedure. In that case, I have to first drop this stored procedure, and then only I can drop this type. Okay, I have dropped that stored procedure, and then I have dropped the type, and it is gone. Now I can create a type again back. So remember that once you have created a type and you are using it in the stored procedure, it cannot be dropped until and unless that stored procedure has been dropped. Here it is. once I get to execute this statement, it should create a type, a table type. Very simple. No hussy fussy about it. Okay, in this case I'm actually just going to create a table very similar to the table actually type data actually defined. It's very similar fields. In this case I'm going to select AU author, AUL name from the these I'm going to select into the temp author, where author where equals 0 equals to 1, and just I'm just creating a structure of the table. Just because I don't want to insert any data directly into the author table, I'm just creating another table so that I can use it to insert the okay. Now that has been created, I have actually just executed this statement right now only, so there is no need to actually run this statement again. Okay, like a drop procedure. Now the main thing comes here. Now here it's actually I am passing a table parameter. Author for CA actually I have just created as a stored procedure, as a table variable up there. Okay, author for CA, and I am creating a stored procedure CA at author CA is the author for CA type. Actually creating author CA, it is always passed as a read only as insert into temp author. Okay, select start from @table CA. Okay, this is the table, this is a table type variable that is where from the data is being getting inserted into the temporary table that I have just created, which is very similar to the table actually I have just created with the 0 equals to 1. Here it is, and this would actually insert the rows into that table from the table variable, and that table variable would be passed from the SQL statement. As you can see, it is being passed from here and is being used here, and it jumps into the data jumps into the temporary jumps into this table. I'm going to execute this stored procedure. Once it has executed the stored procedure is created, then exactly the fun begins. Here it is. Here I am declaring again a table variable which is very similar to the author CA. Authors for CA equals to this thing, and I am inserting this data into the variable, and then I am going to actually execute this stored procedure. Now actually I have to go do all these things together, otherwise I told you, because this is a variable that is being declared, it may lose the value. Okay, so it actually, let's actually run it together. Okay, here let's run it one by one, and let's see what happens. Okay, now I'm going to execute it. Here it is. See, it says you must declare the variable. So you have to actually, when you're passing this thing, this has to be there. You declare a variable, you have inserted the records, you have to execute it together, and now if I execute it, it should work. Okay, the 3 rows inserted, that is from 111 is from here, and the 3 rows inserted, that is coming from the stored procedure. Okay, and there it is. Here we actually are going to check it out with the select statement. Once I run the select statement, all the rows would be actually shown to me. Here are the 3 rows that has been actually inserted in the temp author table. I can delete the temp author table with the delete this, and that's it. As you can see, 3 rows being affected again. Now creating a stored procedure, another stored procedure with the output parameter. Up till now you had been seeing that the input parameter there. Now in this case I am going to show you the output parameter. What is there is very little bit difference. There is nothing big difference. Here is the create stored procedure actually. Okay, first let me check out whether it is there exists. I will drop it. Okay, now this is the create stored procedure as we count authors at the rate state. Here is the where the state would be passed. This will be counting, and the count would be returned. This is a variable that is returns is a int, and it is being output. This would be actually the output of the And how do we use the output, and how do we actually show it, the value of the output? Let's go and check it out. This stored procedure uses the output, and if st is null, in this case I'm checking both of the things, whether the state that is being passed here is null, or I'm using a length trim. I'll trim R trim first, and then actually getting, after trimming them, I'm checking whether the length is equals to 0. Then it begins print null parameter or empty value not allowed, return -1. This is being returning the value -1. That's it. Chapter closed. No other processing of the stored procedure. If it doesn't work, that if the value is there, then it goes and actually does the checking out, select star from author where state equals to @st order by 1. Now immediately, as I have told you, always row count will return the number of the rows affected. So immediately actually I am going to put this in author count, the value of the row count, and it's going to work. Okay, now once I have created the stored procedure, now you will be wondering how is going to get the value out. Okay, just hold on for a minute. Let me actually execute this stored procedure, and I will just show it to you how do we get the value out from the stored procedure. Here it is. Stored procedure has been actually created. Now you will be wondering how to actually get. Here is actually how you do it. Declare that @rate counter equals to int. Counter is the output. CA actually I am passing a parameter actually for California, and then I am printing the value of the counter. Counter is being actually used as the output variable, and you can see it's getting executed. And here it is, that 15 rows is coming from the counter, 115 rows that is generated by the SQL server. Put set no count on, this will disappear. Okay, this is how it is. This is very simple, no big deal. Very simple stored procedure, nothing, no any output parameter. Now actually is the best part, how to raise an error. Whenever you are creating a stored procedure, you will be always raising an error. You want to raise an error, remember that thing. Okay, validating the data and using the raise error, you can use a try and catch statement. Okay, after the error statement, you can use the try and catch statement to catch an error after the error occurs. Okay, the raise error statement lets you raise a system error by coding the system error number for the message ID arguments. Okay, if you specify an error message for the custom error, the error is assigned the value of the 50,000 by default. In most cases, this is not enough. This is enough, sorry. In the addition to the message ID or the message string argument, you can code the severity of the static argument. Now remember, okay, the static code is strictly informational and has no system meaning. You can use any value between 1 and 127 to represent the state the system was in when the error was raised. In most cases, you will be just code for the arguments. The severity arguments indicate how severe the error is. Now, errors from 1 to 10, severity of the error, okay, it's just informational. When you are going to using the 1 to 10, it's just informational. No big deal. Nothing will happen much. It is just for the information. But if the error is between 11 and 19, the error severity is between 11 and 19, then your code jumps to the out of it. Alright, it goes to catch block. Okay, and if there is an error between 20 and 25, this is a very critical error. All the connections are terminated. The stored procedure doesn't get executed. It doesn't do anything. It just terminated the client connection itself. The server does the right thing. It actually terminates from 20 to 25. It is a critical error. Okay, the client connection is immediately terminated. No execution takes place. Okay, this is how it is. You use a raise error, message ID, message string, C status. We will cover it as we can go a little bit further. Now, okay, here is create procedure sp insert title, which inserts the title. Okay, and actually I'm just passing the parameters at the title by ID, defining the int and so on so forth. Okay, I'm just using all the variable name that I'm actually defining it, and this is what actually I'm going to pass it from here. Okay, by int in the as a I'm going to insert a title. Now I'm going to check if access select from the publisher where pub id equals to. Here is what actually going the statement is happening. As you can see, let me bring this thing down. Here it is. Okay, now this is what the stored procedure. If access select start from publisher id equals from publisher where pub id equals to at the pub id. Now where is the pub id coming from? Pub id is coming from here. Okay, now once what is it is doing, it's taking it in the publisher whether this exists. If it exists, then it says begin insert into the titles. Now if it doesn't exist in the publisher, this value, the pub id doesn't exist in the publisher, it is not supposed to be entering in this data into the title table at all, because the publisher it doesn't exist in the pub id doesn't exist in the publisher. It is actually going to create a problem. So what it does, if it doesn't exist, it goes into the else clause and it raises an error, not a valid publisher id 11, 1. 1 to 10 is just informational. 11 to 1 will jump into the block. Remember that with the begin try. Otherwise, it will not. Okay, just let me. I will show it to you how it is. Okay, it will catch an error here. Okay, as you can see, it will jump into this block, and actually you will see it going into this thing. Okay, actually I'll come to it later, a little bit. Now let me explain to you how the stored procedure works. Okay. Now in the case if it is the value supplied, it will say insert the titles and all that value would be inserted. Very simple stored procedure, no big deal. Only the raise error is a little bit thing that you have to understand. That is in the case if the id doesn't matches here, if it doesn't exist, it jumps it here else and begins a raise error. Now very simple, there is nothing done only except this statement is there and else begin, and the only thing happens in the after once you have created stored procedure, then only, not before that thing. So let's actually execute and create this stored procedure. Let's go and execute the stored procedure, and once we execute the stored procedure, you will see this stored procedure does get executed. Now it has been created. Now let's actually run this thing, inserting a row and record with a valid publisher id. As you can see, I am trying to insert this thing with a valid publisher id. Let's see what happens. Okay, now here it is what happens. It is if there is an error that is being we will jump to the catch, because I have used the 11. 1 to 10 will not jump into the begin catch block. This will actually jump because it is 11 to 19. Or 20 to 25 is critical, thus actually the connection gets terminated, no problem at all. The stored procedure doesn't get executed in that case. Here it is. Okay, here in this case it says is not a valid procedure id. This is a custom error. The id was not valid, so it got terminated. As you can see, the id was not valid. Okay, now in this case I am actually giving a valid publisher id, and this should actually go and execute correctly without actually showing an error. Until and unless I have executed it twice, in that case, okay, you have seen one row is affected, but if I actually try to run it again with a similar case, it will give me an error because it actually creates a primary key violation. Okay, here it is. I am going to check it out whether the row has got inserted or not. Let's select the SQL statement, and as you can see that a row has got inserted. Okay, so far so good. Okay, this is a little bit of variation of the upper stored procedure only, no big deal, nothing else. Now in this procedure I am saying everything is the same actually. In this case I am actually checking for all the variables whether it is null. If any one of them is null, it returns a -1 and it doesn't get executed. That's it. That's the only difference. As you can see, this is the second statement I am checking is if the publisher date is greater than get date, then I am raising an error, which means that is 11-1, which is going to jump to the block. Okay, now let's go to the down, and actually I am going to execute the stored procedure. And again the statements are very similar to the earlier stored procedure, no big difference. It's just another variation of it. I'm just going to execute the stored procedure. And if it exists, well and good, we are going to run that stored procedure. In most cases it will exist. Okay, it already exists. Okay, no problems, the procedure exists. We are going to run the stored procedure and see it. In this case I am actually using a first value as null, so it should get terminated, because none of the value actually is allowed to the hold a value of null. There is no error actually getting processed or something. The stored procedure itself get executed in the very beginning. As you can see, it gets actually no null value alert, procedure terminated, no processing done, it gets terminated at the start of the procedure itself. Now we will go and really test the stored procedure for the next statement. In this case I have actually given a value that is the date, which is much bigger than the today's date. As you can see, 2012 12th May, that is the May, and the 10th of the date, 10th of the statement. Okay, and let's actually execute this statement. Because the date is greater than today's date, it will create a problem and it will actually jump to the begin catch block. It will raise an error. As you can see, this is not a valid date. Date cannot be whatever you wanted to put it here, and then there is this is a custom error message here, it is coming from, and so forth. That is how it is. You can see that has been raised the error for the date. And I think so that should be left with the only one thing more in the stored procedure. Mostly I will not like to go into this thing, because usually this is related to the SQL Server system, okay, for the administrator. Okay, if you want to run a stored procedure, you have to actually create a stored procedure and use USP proc option with the stored procedure. It has many parameters, and this is how actually you can run this thing. I am not going to execute the stored procedure, though I can do it, but I will leave it as it is. You can create a stored procedure here. You can create a stored procedure, and then you can use a SP proc option with the proc name, and this is actually used if you want to do some processing in the very initial, whenever you want to start a stored procedure. Whenever your SQL Server starts, you want to do some processing, it is done actually at that time, nothing, no big deal. Okay, it is usually done by the SQL Server stored by the SQL Server administrator. It is not actually, it is not being done by the regular who programs the SQL Server. Okay, that's it. I will stop this procedure program here. I hope it was very informative for you. Thank you for listening to me.